last night of tricks or treats. Happy Halloween. We hope you have enjoyed the Halloween programming so far. To wrap up the last phase of the fest, we have Pam Grossman, author, podcaster, and real life witch. Hi, Pam.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and happy Halloween.
Thank you so much for joining us. I am so thrilled to talk to you. Um, I would say my level of witchiness is always grounded in intuition and energy and just kind of like feeling vibes, which I think a lot of people can relate to. And I know that a lot of these things are coming into popular culture in the form of essential oils, crystals, smudge sticks, even I've seen easy to pick up at a Whole Foods. And I just want to know if you could walk through when did you begin to channel your witch energy, and what was your growth process into this now fully realized almost career witch?
Sure. So, when I'm asked this question, I usually start way back in my childhood because, like so many kids, I was just a huge magic nerd. I was obsessed with fairy tales and mythology. And we had this little patch of woods in the back of our house. I lived in very magical suburban New Jersey, but we just so happened to have this little, like, magical patch of woods behind the house, and I would just go out there and very intuitively play and do rituals and things like that. And I often say that most people grow out of their magic phase, and I just grew further into mine. And I think things really took off when I was a teenager and I discovered actual spell books. I was coming of age in the 90s. And so this was kind of like one of the first peaks of the occult revival, which honestly, I feel like every few years we're having another occult revival. But in the 90s, there definitely was one. And you could find these spell books in the occult section of your library or your bookstore. And so I started playing around with those spells, and some of them worked. And it really blew my mind. And, I just kind of added layers and layers on top of it as I've gotten older, and added history and some scholarship and lots of research, but also just a lot of artistry. And you used that word intuition before. So much of witchcraft is very intuitive. And I think it actually has as much to do with creativity and personalization as it does like following some set, bunch of formulas or rules. So it's really just been an evolution.
That's wonderful. And I think you now identify as a pagan woman. Is that like your first identifier and like what you would lead with as far as your style of witchcraft?
Oh my goodness. That one's always really hard for me to answer because certainly I think pagan is like the safest, most umbrella term. And under that term are lots of other different modalities of spirituality. I'm also Jewish. Like, I was raised Jewish by two Jewish parents. My Jewish ancestry, Eastern European ancestry is really important to me too. So it's not like I stopped being Jewish and started being pagan. There are a lot of people who turn away from a religion of origin and they turn towards witchcraft. And for me, I definitely moved away from Judaism because there were some problems and issues I had with it when I was exploring. But as I've gotten older, I've kind of started figuring out how to weave the two together a little bit more mindfully. But yeah, sometimes I say I'm a Jew witch. Sometimes I say I'm pagan. I think just saying that I'm a witch kind of covers it all.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, there is lots of witchcraft, I think, in basically every religion. So it makes sense
Yes.
how you, I would say, break from one and end up in the other.
For sure, for sure. And some people, like, that's fine if they, especially people who grow up in very fundamentalist or very literalist versions of whatever religion, they were brought up in. It can be really oppressive for people. It can,
Mhm.
and I want to really put this caveat forth that I think there's beauty and truth in all religions. It's just human beings who misinterpret a lot of the texts and use it for really awful purposes. So I actually know some witches who are also still Christian, I don't think you have to stop being one to be the other, but I certainly understand why witchcraft is very attractive to people who grew up in an environment that was oppressive, that didn't honor femininity, that didn't honor queer people or people of color, that didn't honor the body or nature or sexuality. So we definitely attract a lot of outsiders, that's for sure.
And I think you quoted this in your book, but as a Pew Research study is something around like 27% of people identify just as spiritual, which I feel like is also a result of kind of what you just explained.
Yeah, I think that many of us are spiritual. And for me, spirituality is just about seeking interconnection with something greater than ourselves and with each other, because I believe that there is sacredness in every living being,
Mm.
and even inanimate objects too. There's an animistic standpoint. So, we can say that we're interfacing with the energy of a rock, right? Or even a tree, which might not be animate in the same way that an animal or a person is, but I still believe that there's spirit and life force and sacredness in that tree. Um, so yeah, I think that there are so many different ways to be a witch, but generally speaking, that's what I think spirituality is. It's just about seeking that meaning making, and it's about seeking that interconnection with the life force, and honoring
Mhm.
it in everything and everyone.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I love that. So I mean, like I said, I feel like this is rising, and I know that you oftentimes equate like this rise of the witch with rise in the feminist wave, and there's a lot of parallels there. But if people are feeling this sort of like rising interest or rising power within them, do you have any advice for where to get started?
Ooh, I mean, people do actually ask me this a lot, and I tell people to really, there's that word again, trust their intuition.
Mm.
So go to the bookstore, go to the library, or just click around online and see what is calling to you, and trust that whatever is calling to you is right. It's the first right step. A lot of, I think, any kind of spiritual seeking is about, following signs, or I always say, follow the trail of cosmic breadcrumbs. And what I mean by that is, we are all on different unique paths. And I believe that spirit, capital S, spirit, really speaks to us in so many different personal ways. So for someone, they might see a film like The Craft and get turned on by it, and that might lead them in one direction. Or someone else might be really into gardening, and so they get into plant magic. And someone else might be really into I don't know, mermaids, and so they get very into like water spirits and deities. It really doesn't matter where you begin, because that is the right step for you. So that's the first thing I say. And then in terms of more pragmatic advice, paying attention to the cycles of the moon, the cycles of the seasons is really great foundational work. And it also just, I think, helps make you feel more connected. There's that word again, to spirit, and to those cycles of the body, the cycles of transformation that are inherent in our human experience and our experience as a living being. So and as you get deeper, depending on the phase of the moon, there's different energy work you can do. As the moon is waxing, that's a great time for manifesting and growing things. As the moon is waning, that's a good time for, trying to kind of banish things or diminish things or release things. So there's all kinds of fun magic that you can get into that mirrors those cycles as well.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I know when I was in high school, I started going to our local occult store and, dabbled with tarot and spirit guide meditation and all of this fun, wonderful stuff. And I would agree that it was definitely a great starting place to meet new, interesting people and kind of explore that curiosity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And tarot is getting more and more popular. And
Mm.
I think it's such a great tool because it's a tool that helps you to communicate with this other essence. And some people say, well, it's just tapping into your own unconscious. And if that's what it's doing, I believe our unconscious is sacred and has messages for us too. Maybe it is tapping into some other realm and it's guides that are communicating through the cards. It really doesn't matter what paradigm feels right for you. The fact is that these are really effective, meaningful tools that can help unlock so much beauty and so much magic and so much wisdom and really make your life that much deeper and richer. So I think tarot is a beautiful place to start for lots of people.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it is very hard to think introspectively without a prompt. So I would agree that something like that was definitely very helpful to get that started internally. So first and foremost, this is a film festival. I know in your book you get into the power of witches like the Wicked Witch of the West and Sabrina, but do you personally have a favorite fictional witch or a witch you would love to make a case for, or who's your favorite character in the witch realm of film?
There are so many. The one that comes to mind, because I just rewatched it recently, is the protagonist of the Robert Eggers film, The Witch.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
sure a lot of you guys are familiar with that movie.
Mm-hmm.
I adored that film. And I really love, I mean, spoiler alert for people who haven't seen it, but I love how the whole end of the film, where the protagonist essentially embodies the witch herself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he leaves a lot of room for interpretation, whether or not it's literal or metaphorical. Is it all a dream? But what I love about that film is he also collapses a lot of different aspects of the witch archetype into one film and really crystallizes it. So you see, kind of images that are derived from the world of fine art. You see images that are derived from, Christian beliefs about evil, lascivious, sexual, diabolical women, the best kind, right? You see fairy tale witches, but it's all of a piece that helps to serve his story. So I just thought it was an ingenious, beautiful film. I love it so much, but that's just the first one that comes to mind. There's so many.
Yeah, no, that's a great film. I think Screenland Armor Hair usually shows it on the Equinox, which is always a fun watch.
Right.
And then I know recently you had the opportunity to be an occult consultant or one of 3 occult consultants on The Craft, and the reboot that I think is coming out here in a few days. So I'm hoping that either you can share something. Does that mean if they had consultants, they're looking for historical accuracy, the actual occult accuracy, or do you have anything, knowing you have a captive audience of film fans here, that they might like to know about the upcoming reboot?
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm not allowed to say very much, and I signed like a dictionary thickness worth of NDAs about this thing, but here's what I'll say. This film is it's really different than the first film, which, you know, I think it's going to have a lot of different reactions from people because anytime something is revisited for a new generation, there's going to be a whole host of reactions about it. What attracted me to the intention of this film is that the writer director Zoe Lister Jones really wanted to like retell this story in a way for a modern audience. And young girls today are so much more savvy about things like intersectional feminism and sexual politics and consent and all of those kinds of things. So I know that that was really, really important to her. And I know that when they were casting the film, it was really important that, yes, they had a Black actor as they did in the original Craft, but they also cast a trans Latinx young actress, which is just really exciting too. So those were some of the things that really attracted me to the film. But my role and the role of the other 2 consultants was, and I'm trying not to give any spoilers. Let's just say Zoe asked that the rituals and spells that these girls do in her film was based more on the kind of feminist magic that like me and my coven do.
Uh-huh.
Now, this is all with the caveat that this is for Hollywood, right?
Right,
So
right.
there's going to be so much stuff that, you know, a ritual that would take 1 hour when I do it, or
Mhm.
6 hours, you get one line of the ritual, right? So, you know, I know
Right.
there's a lot of talk of like authentic witchcraft is going to be in this movie, and it is, but it is still very much for a Hollywood film. So,
Inspired by.
exactly, exactly. The other thing I'll say is she wanted a lot of authentic magic, but there's
Mhm.
stuff that happens in this movie that could not happen in real life. And so we had to make up, you know, using authentic spells and kind of make up what would the language be like for these things that can't
Mhm.
actually happen in real life, or at least that I've never experienced based on, you know, the boundaries of physics. You know, some of it was about helping with rituals and spells and language. Some of it was about images. I mean, things that you would take for granted, and lots of little Easter eggs when you're watching the movie, but took, you know, days and days and days of research. And, you know, making sure that there are some images that feel like they're coming from, let's say, old witchcraft manuals
Mhm.
or old occult grimoires and things like that. So, it was definitely a lot of fun. It is the kind of job, I'll just say, that you put so much time and energy into it, and then what they actually use of all the information given them is like this
Right.
much.
Yeah.
But you know, I'm definitely, you know, I'll be very intrigued to see what people think of the film for sure.
I mean, yeah, it's a cool idea. At least they did reach out to you, and consider the whole picture when going to create something. I like you said. I mean, I'm sure the original craft has maybe nothing that could truly relate back to true spells or practices. So I can understand why they would want to. Is there more?
Actually, the original
Ooh.
craft had a consultant too, a
Oh, nice.
Wiccan priestess.
Oh,
Her name
wow.
was Pat Devon.
Okay.
And a lot of what they're doing in the original craft is based on real spells and rituals too.
Oh,
The
awesome.
original craft, I mean, like when they call the corners, that's something we
Mm,
do
true.
in, you know, actual practice. You're casting a
Mhm.
magic circle, so you're calling in the different directions and elements. You know, certainly the original deity, Menon, is a
Mhm.
fictionalized deity, and you can read all about that. It's pretty interesting how they came up with that idea. But you know, there's a lot of stuff in that film that is based on older rituals too. So I have a lot of respect for both that film and this new one, because, you know, even though it's Hollywood, they were trying to be respectful. They went out to actual practitioners and try to involve us as much as possible. And, you know, you have to give them credit for trying. That's for sure.
For sure. Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure it's gonna be another great witch film. So I'm excited to watch it.
Hooray! I hope you
So
like
you kind
it.
of alluded to this when you were talking about your role in the craft and how a lot of your witchcraft does come back to feminism and is rooted in feminism and like the divine feminine power. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, the witch as an archetype is almost always female. Certainly, there are people who were accused of being witches during the witch hunts of Europe and, you know, the New England colonies, like and, you know, of course, in Salem, that were men and women. But it was more women than men who were accused of being witches by far.
Yeah.
And the archetype in fairy tales and, you know, certainly in literature and in film and art is almost always female. And the reason for that is, you know, I often say that witches reflect our fears and our fantasies about feminine power. And so the witch is such a weird creature because it's always part fiction and always part fact. Throughout history, there have been magic workers and healers and people who use divination like tarot or casting runes or stones or communicating with the dead. These are gifts that people across cultures have had throughout time. But the actual word witch and our conception of what a witch looks like, a lot of that comes out of this Christian idea that was popularized in the 14th century and kept growing in popularity really through the 17th century, when they were trying to shame women and shame female sexuality and associate it with diabolism and devilry. And so that kind of stink of sulfur, of hell and fire and brimstone, you can't quite get it off the witch, no matter how hard you try. And, since the 19th century, with the first rise of feminism, we've seen early feminists reclaim the witch as, this symbol that they wanted to take back and this word they wanted to use as a badge of honor, because witches were, have been throughout time ostracized and maligned and shamed and persecuted. So it's a word that has a lot of power. It still has a lot of controversy and misunderstanding around it, but it's one that I think more and more people are understanding is, a statement of reclamation, of freedom and liberation, especially for those of us who consider ourselves carriers of feminine energy, no matter what our gender is.
Yeah, I mean, I what you said, if we had to bear the bad half of it, it's great to be able to claim the now evolved badass version of it. So
Exactly.
yes.
Yeah, and there's something powerful about taking a negative epithet and reclaiming it for yourself and wearing it as that badge of honor. I mean, I can't help but remember during the first maybe it was like I can't remember if it was the first, second, or third, but one of the debates with Hillary, and who's now 45, who hopefully won't be very soon. Sorry, I'm politicizing here. But and he called her a nasty woman, and he meant it as this way to silence her and shame women, right? But all these women then started calling themselves nasty women, right? They took that phrase back and they were like, damn right, I'm a nasty woman. Like, you can't mess with me. So I think it's a similar kind of energetic exchange or energetic transformation that has happened with the word witch over the years. And, we're seeing it with the word bruja for, Latinx magic and brujeria, which also was a negative epithet for many, many years. And now a lot of people from, Latinx backgrounds are using that word as a word of pride. So it's really, really exciting, and it gives me lots of hope, and it's also really fun.
Yeah, I agree with you. I love the wave of women who are now identifying as nasty women, witches, and reclaiming power for themselves.
Absolutely. We
So
need
back to
more of
Halloween. Halloween night, the reason we are all here. So as someone who identifies as a witch, is this spiritually a good night for you? Something that you look forward to? Do you have traditions or spells or anything that you do every year? And what is this Halloween going to look like for you?
Absolutely. So some folks might know of the holiday Samhain. It looks like it's spelled Samhain, and a lot of people pronounce it Samhain, but it's really pronounced Samhain. And this is a pagan holiday where we essentially are honoring our dead. We are communing with the spirits. We're lighting candles on our ancestor altars. Sometimes we're doing what's called a silent supper or a dumb supper, which is a beautiful meal that you eat in silence, and you lay out a setting for your dearly departed with food. And then later you leave the food out as an offering at a crossroads or in nature, somewhere really special and beautiful. And a lot of us also do divination during this holiday because it's believed that if you'll often hear this phrase, the veil between worlds is thinnest, right? I'm sure
Yeah.
a lot of you guys have
Yep.
heard it. And it's this notion that, look, spirits, I believe, are around us all the time and we're connected to them all the time. But there is this theory that during this time of year, we're extra, extra, extra close to them. And we can really get messages coming through more clearly, which means it's a great time to do any kind of divination, whether that's trance or tarot or runes or scrying, whatever it is, because the spirits will, help get those messages through a bit clearer for everybody. So those are some ideas. And I'm certainly going to be doing some of that this evening. But I'm also like going to be eating candy and watching horror movies like everybody else. Like, let's be real, because that's really fun.
Right, exactly. I know when I was thinking of these questions, I'm like, I'm gonna ask her this, and she's gonna be like, I don't know, wearing a costume, hanging out at home.
I mean,
uh,
that's one thing I will say, which is something I just didn't plan for as I became a bit more of a full-time witch, is October is so busy for those of us whose job this is. And so often by the time we get to Samhain, I'm tired, like working all month. And so, I'll certainly, meet with my coven. I'll do my candle lighting. Sometimes I'll do my silent supper, but I also kind of just need to chill out at this point too, if I'm honest. Oh, let me say one more thing, that tonight is the second full moon of October, which means it's a blue moon. That's what blue moon means. It's not literally blue. It just means it's the second full moon of the month. And what's beautiful about a full moon is it is a time of doing rituals around release, whether that's releasing something you want to let go of, or you've completed a project or completed a spell and now you're like releasing your offering out into the world. So, like, let's say you wrote a book. The full moon is a great time to say, okay, it's done, spirits, I'm ready to release this to the world. So, if any of you feel called to do any kind of spell work around, supercharge and then release kind of energy, tonight is a really great night to do that too.
That's awesome. I mean, if someone was interested in doing something like this, what would they get started? Are you lighting candles? Are you thinking internally? Are you saying a spell?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. It really depends. I often say that being a witch is kind of like being a chef. So when you're first learning how to cook, you can use recipes and teach yourself. You can use the spell books, but you really become a witch or really become a chef when you start taking those lessons and really personalizing it and making it your own. So I would say there's no wrong way to do it as long as it's coming from a place of intention and love and compassion and goodness. But yeah, when in doubt, lighting a candle, that's always helpful. I always tell people that when you are doing some kind of a spell around manifesting something, it's always good to give back. Like if you're asking spirit to give you something, what are you going to give spirit? How are you going to honor spirit? Is that, gratitude? Are you writing a beautiful poem? Are you leaving flowers out on your altar or a libation or some food? But just remember to give back, that it is an exchange. And it's always good to have good magical manners, as I always say.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great advice. I know, again, as someone who has dabbled in these areas, I think that is one of the most intimidating things is like, you watch a horror movie and it's like, oh my God, I did one thing wrong. Like suddenly I'm cursed forever. Like it seems like going into something like that is you should be very knowledgeable. There's not much room for exploration, but it seems like from what you're saying, it's a lot of exploration. It's a lot of learning, feeling out what works for you, and then growing from there.
That's right. And it's evolving always. And in the same way, when you're first starting to cook, you wouldn't go out to the world and be like, I'm a professional chef, because you haven't earned that yet.
Right.
In the same way, like if you're just starting out, absolutely, like experiment, play, be careful, do research. I wouldn't then start like, telling the whole wide world that you're a professional witch now, because it takes a long time and there's a lot to learn and you can make
Mhm.
mistakes. I mean, a lot of times people kind of learn lessons because they'll do a spell and the spell will come true, but it'll come true in this way where you're like, oh, spirit really has a sense of humor, doesn't it? Because like you didn't specify this, or you asked for this, so it interpreted it this other way. And that's
Mhm.
why I often just have a little loophole in my spells where I'll do my spell and then I'll say, or if you have a better idea, like, if there's another way that I could be of service to love, to spirit, to compassion, to kindness, please work through me and show me the better way for my
Mhm.
highest good and the highest good of the world.
Mhm.
That's a good like insurance policy and it'll cover you. So take
That's
it from
great.
me.
I love that. That's amazing. I have one more question for you. You've talked a little bit about your coven. Are there details or anything you can share about this? Like, is this a large group of all women? Is it just a few of you that you've known for a long time, a short time, or what does that look like in reality?
Yeah, well, I have two covens. I have my private coven and then one that's a little more public. So
Mhm.
my private coven is a group of people who, yeah, they're feminine identifying. There are
Mhm.
some, non-binary folks in the coven, but generally speaking, there are no cis men in our, sorry dudes, but just happen that way. Um, and we're a group of people who've been meeting for a couple years now. And at first, we were all in New York City, but then some people moved away, and some
Mhm.
people, got brought in who live elsewhere. And so it really depends who's going to make it to a meeting, depending on who's in town. Or now everything's via Zoom, of course. We do Zoom coven meetings, and they do work magnificently well. I wish we could be in person, but Zoom is actually pretty effective for this stuff. It's all about intention and
Mhm.
attention.
Mhm.
Um, so that's the first thing. And that's just my private practice. And then, I have a Patreon, and all members of the Patreon, all my backers get membership to a digital coven. And I
Mhm.
do exclusive rituals and videos for members of that coven too. And so that's been really lovely. And it's a really lovely community of people who, they met because they like my podcast, The Witch Wave, and they want to learn more. And it's
Mhm.
really built this gorgeous community of exchange and friendship, and it's been really fruitful. It's been lovely to be a part of, even though I'm, the kind of excuse that brings people together. They're
Mhm.
finding each other and answering each other's questions as much as I'm answering stuff. So it's really, really magical.
Oh, yeah, I love that. That's beautiful. I thought of one more question as you were talking about this. So, the difference between maybe spells that you're doing on your own versus spells that you take to the coven, can you differentiate and talk through those a little bit?
Oh, it really depends. The spells that I do on my own, they are usually more elaborate and, intense, and um they're very personal. And so I'm using that time to be meditative and really take the time. In a coven meeting, often we're meeting around a theme. It's usually one of the Sabbats or pagan holy days. Sometimes we're meeting on a certain moon cycle, or excuse me, moon phase. And so we usually have like an assigned topic we're working on, and we do a spell together or a meditation together that's kind of agreed upon. And whoever's leading the meeting that evening kind of determines what they want that to be. So even though those spells or rituals can feel really personal too,
Mhm.
because you're doing it in a group setting, there's just something really lovely about witnessing each other. And we often, not always, but often choose to share, if a vision comes through, or if we're trying to manifest, let's say, liberation as
Mhm.
the theme or the spell that meeting, we'll then go around and share what that actually means to us. And is there a specific thing we're trying to be free of or free to do? you know so it's really beautiful, and just getting to bear witness to each other is such a privilege. It really, really is. And it's also emotionally supportive. People bring things to the coven that are deep and heavy, but we also like cackle and, are perverts and have the best time as well. So,
Sounds
I
great.
highly recommend it. I was never a group person,
Mhm.
for most of my life. And then I kind of I don't know, I grew up a little bit and I realized I need people, and being part of a coven has really helped my practice, and it's also really helped my heart. So I recommend it a lot for those of you who are solitary. Solitary is great too, but I like
Sure.
both.
I mean, that sounds like the best group of gals you can have.
They're amazing.
I don't think I have anything else specifically to ask. Do you have any parting words about Halloween? And then we can get to where people can find you after this short segment.
Yeah, I mean, my parting words that are coming to me, they're a little heavy for a horror festival, but I think it's worth spreading the message anyway. This is a holiday about thanking our ancestors, and whether or not you have a good relationship with your ancestors, or your ancestors were assholes and oppressors and you don't want to be anything like them, or what have you. We have so much to learn from where we came from, and we can be thankful for the tough lessons too, and saying, I don't want to be like my great great
Mhm.
grandmother who was a total jerk. Or we can thank them for, yes, you were a jerk, but all the choices you made gave me the life that I have now, and I'm not going to squander it. So I would just say, take time to thank the people that you came from, the people that are supportive. And also, your ancestors don't have to be your blood ancestors. They can be your spiritual ancestors, your chosen family, artists you love, musicians you dig, activists you look up to. I believe that they want to be remembered. And when we remember them, and when we honor them and take the time to do that magic, we then fuel ourselves up to make even more magic and more positive change, and spread more love and more joy and more sexiness and more power to, everybody, everyone who needs it and everyone who deserves it. And so, yeah, Halloween is so much fun. I hope you have a blast. And I hope you also remember who you are, remember who you came from, and just feel a lot of gratitude for it, because if it wasn't for them, you wouldn't be here right now watching awesome horror movies.
Those are perfect parting words. That was great. Do you want to share where people can maybe join your digital coven, listen to you on your podcast, a little bit about your book, whatever
Oh my
you want to plug
goodness.
here? This is
All
your
the
time.
things. Sure. So I have a podcast called The Witch Wave. I interview the most incredible magical visionaries around, everybody from practicing witches to drag queens to rock stars. I mean, everyone you can think of. It's really, really fabulous. And you can find that wherever podcasts are downloaded. I also have the Patreon coven for Witchwave listeners, which is patreon.com/witchwave. You can join the coven, and you can also get lots of free bonus episodes and, great content, in addition to access to rituals and things like that. I have a book called Waking the Witch: Reflections on Women, Magic, and Power. Oh, I just so happen to have a copy right here.
Ooh, I'm halfway through it. It's lovely.
Yay! And this is the new paperback version. It came out in hardcover last year and just came out in paperback this year. I hope you like it. I think that's the main stuff. I'm very easy to find, pamgrossman.com. So that'll link you to all my other Twitter pated Instagram crackers and all that stuff.
I can confirm your podcast is lovely. I enjoy every person you bring on there.
Yay!
And yes, definitely find Pam on the internet, Pam Grossman. I don't know if I ever said your last name. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I didn't take our note to look in the camera. I'm now looking in the camera as we say goodbye. But yes, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure. And thank you everyone for sticking through Tricks and Treats to the end here. Happy Halloween.